Welcome to a brief introduction of the upcoming third course online in a series of online courses focused on traditional and esoteric astrology. This one is called The Spiritual Wisdom Within One's Horoscope. It will be beginning on Tuesday, July 10th, with myself, Donna Mitchell-Moniak, and I hope you'll join me. If you have astrology background, I think you'll find this course quite practical, useful, and revelatory. The Master DK gave us one way to look at the spiritual path that was quite distinct, and it is the spiral cyclic understanding of the spiritual path. It, of course, acknowledges that there is a succession or progressive sequential component to the spiritual path and to the evolution and maturation of a human being, and all beings for that matter. But the idea of spiral cyclic evolution provides that there is a simultaneity and a multiplicity of the evolution of the aspects of ourself and our consciousness, as well as our spiritual beingness, that is going on simultaneously. He presented this certainly through the science of esoteric astrology, as well as esoteric psychology, and his great treatise, The Rays and Initiations, on the path itself. The idea here is similar to that of an infant or a young child who, at any given moment, is, let's say, learning to perceive through eyes, ears, to learn language, to read the cues, the social cues around him or her. At the same time, that child's bones, muscles, brain, and every aspect of their physical body is also maturing. So there's a simultaneity of physical, energetic, that is to say, etheric, emotional, mental, and even one could suggest spiritual development that is going on for that infant and young child, all at the same time. Again, the simultaneity of the multiplicity of the facets of oneself. And the same could be suggested, of course, for adults, that we are always constantly learning, we are constantly moving in and out of relationships change. And so even just from a mundane point of view, this idea of the simultaneity of the multiplicity of what's going on within ourselves, one can see is true. And so when we apply that to the spiritual path and the spiritual maturation of a person, Master DK calls that the spiral cyclic maturing. And so this image of this flower depicts this well. And as was said, in any given incarnation, and certainly from a esoteric astrological point of view, we are only talking about this incarnation because the horoscope or birth chart only refers to this one incarnation. So in any given incarnation, you might have chosen for yourself before you incarnated certain spiritual developments, certain emphases that would mature you along the path. It might have been your physical plane existence, emotional and empathetic growth, learning new information, or learning to utilize the information that you've learned in past lives, or the undoing of mental understanding and conceptual understandings. Therefore, the undoing of mental habits. You might have chosen to take on a contemplative practice, which could include any of the arts and art forms, as well as philosophical musing, religious contemplation, scriptural contemplation from any of the scriptures of the world, or to contemplate nature and the various ways that nature is constantly teaching us. You might have also chosen that this life is a life wherein you will cultivate yourself meditatively. Therefore, truth of being, what is reality, clarifying, again, all aspects of the self would come from a meditative practice, emotions, mental, and even ideas and concepts. So we can see that there's a lot that could be potentially going on within any of us during this incarnation that has to do with the evolution of ourself as a human being. And furthermore, much that could be going on that is specific to not ourselves as a mundane being in a mundane world doing, worldly endeavors, but that has to do with the evolution of ourselves as a spiritual being. So one could suggest that if we reflect upon our life, that we might be able to determine some of those chosen aspects that we chose as an incarnating higher being into the denser realities, circumstances, causes, and conditions of our incarnated life. I believe that one's birth chart, one's horoscope, can reveal much of what we've just suggested. In order to do that, you, as you have learned and are utilizing both traditional and esoteric astrological information, you would first need to do that reflection to really ponder what stands out to you, not from the point of view of the skill sets that you've used, the way that you might have a long-standing, long-term relationship, you might have been divorced 3 times. These are not the considerations that we would look at. We might look at instead, why is it that you have a long-standing, long-term relationship? What are the qualities in you that have made that possible? Equally so, if you've had 1, 2, 3 divorces, let's say, well, what are the qualities in you that have instigated those changes within your relationships? So we still would come back to reflecting, pondering, assessing and examining ourselves in order to understand this. And then what we would find if we have astrological background is that our chart can give us information about our point on the spiritual path. And, the spiritual path is quite a robust, varied path. We might be developing the sense of self. We might be letting the sense of self go. We might be developing what is true heart, what is heart mind. We might be developing the capacity of the mind. We might be developing a certain renunciation of the world and of worldly affairs. There are many ways that we could view the spiritual path in different junctures of the path. Our chart will also very clearly display the chosen emphases for spiritual development during this lifetime. In other words, we have chosen that before we incarnated. We might have chosen that with good counsel in the David Chan realms, with good wise counselors, and we would have, with some knowledge, engaged a life. For instance, if there's difficulty in our childhood, difficulty with relationships, difficulty in holding down a job, let's say there's poverty in the life, let's say there's affluence in the life, but we're still quite unhappy. So all of these things would have been chosen by us for the processes of spiritual maturation and the development of heart-mind that they provide us. The horoscope will also display uncategorically the troublesome tendencies of our personality. It will furthermore suggest if they are ready for transformation. The birth chart will also suggest if they require transformation. There are various points in our chart that do not require transformation yet. That would be for another lifetime. Maybe we are integrating transformation that has gone on in a lifetime before, or in a cycle of lifetimes before. These kinds of things also could be intuited and suggested by the display of the planets in the chart. My goal with course number 3 in this series of courses this year is to help you learn how to view your chart with all of these features in mind, so that with that kind of clarity, kind of gazing back at us from our horoscope, we can then take on that which we are capable of taking on of transformation. We can stabilize ourselves in that which, as a higher presence, a soul, we have said to ourselves and displayed in the chart, you have such and such a skill. You have such and such a level of awareness. Live from it. So we want to utilize this information. This next course starts, as I said, on Tuesday, July 10th. Now, one could ask, what does the Master K actually mean when he says turn the spiral on our planets? It was a phrase that he used not just in esoteric astrology, but in esoteric psychology, discipleship in the New Age, volumes 1 and 2, and in his whole idea and conceptualization that he gave us of the spiritual path overall. To turn the spiral is on one level to refine. Let's say to refine our Mars, to refine our Venus, which that might sound redundant since Venus refines, but to refine how we live our Venus, to refine our moon, etc. Another way that it can manifest is to ratchet up the livingness, to be accountable for a higher way with, let's say, our Jupiter, our Mercury, our sun sign. To purify, again, let's say something related to the physical body, the physical plane life, our desire nature, to planets that are related to that. To act as if. The Master DK uses this phrase quite frequently, and it is always an invitation, if not an injunction, to act as if we were the higher self in any given situation. So to act as if our mind was the mind of a higher self. Our emotions, our relational processes were being lived from the qualities and capacities of our higher nature, etc. And so fundamentally, to act as if is to live energetically true to truth of being within the measurement, within the co-measurement that we are capable of. Now, these various maturations, again, keep in mind, like an infant or a young child, there's a variety of maturations going on all at the same time. These maturations fundamentally can be accomplished through 2 everyday processes. We have to turn and face ourselves, and that's a process of self-reflection, self-examination, to be honest with oneself, truthful, conscientious, and excited about living from truth of being, from our higher factors, not just the mediocre, everyday, get through the day, then zone out with the TV factors, but our higher self. And then the second process would be to turn and help our brothers. Both of these phrases come from the rules of the road that the Master DK gave us. To turn and help others is, of course, going to call upon the same selflessness, the same self-forgetfulness, the same generosity of heart and mind, let alone of time and possibly of our resources. And so the Dalai Lama encapsulates this idea in this statement: our prime purpose in life is to help others. And if we are helping others, we are automatically in constant examination of ourselves. We are saying yes rather than saying no. We are investigating in a flash of a second selfishness or selflessness. And of course, if we look out to the world and acknowledge that the majority of the world, or at least 60% of the world's population, does not live an affluent, leisurely, and largely secure life. Much of the world is quite troubled. And as these two images convey to us, there's a lot of help that is needed by our fellow brothers and sisters. And even in our own communities, there might be a lot of help that's needed right next door, whether or not we know about it. So, as Einstein said, only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile. Now, within esoteric astrology, since that is the focus of this course, this twofold activity, self-reflection, facing ourselves, and helping others, manifests and demonstrates through each planet's placement in our birth chart. We are called to a certain level of responsibility with Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Moon, Sun, our Saturn, etc. Every placement in our horoscope is displaying our range, displaying what we are being called to and what we incarnated to bring forward. Therefore, all the points of the chart have the possibility of speeding one along the spiritual path. Thus, if we learn to and begin to look at our chart as a spiral rather than just a flat plane, a piece of paper with squiggles and lines on it. But imagine that it is very dynamic, very active, that it is constantly offering these turns of the spiral within itself, the chart. Well, in order to do that, we would have to ponder how you live each of the planets in my chart. We would watch ourselves through the day. We would observe how our Mars gets triggered, how its buttons are pushed, how we push other people's buttons and push at them with our Mars, for example. We would observe how our Venus, our likes, our preferences, our avoidances, the Goldilocks syndrome that we all live in the variety of ways that we do, is what we are living in any given moment. Are we, what are we choosing? Are we choosing Starbucks? Are we choosing Dunkin' Donuts? Why are we choosing either one? And what are we choosing? As a simple example. So this process would be one that must be engaged with enthusiasm, non-judgment. And through that, we would assess and analyze both the mundane and the spiritual range of the planets as they are demonstrating through our day. And if we consider the planet because we're observing, because we're ready to take on this process, whether or not we're going to take course 3, anyone with astrology background could do this, then we will begin to experience this flowering of our own chart. Again, even without taking the course, just doing this examination would be very fruitful and worthwhile. So you would be encouraged to, for instance, print out the PDF of this flower image that is attached in the YouTube and utilize it. Print out 7 of them and do this examination for a week. And through the process of the week, you would note, and I've only chosen 4 planets, you would note where on this spiral of evolution, the bottom would be a lowly, coarse, and quite selfish way of living a particular planet. And the top would be, a higher self, soul in its majesty and glory, or with realization and awareness, this kind of thing, heart, mind, right? So we would do this, and you can see even on day 3, I've got Jupiter in a low position. Let's say that we were, we were miserly in the beginning of the day with our time or our energy or our resources, or just discourteous first thing in the morning. And then by the end of the day, we were, the opposite. We were quite generous and giving and kind and courteous. Maybe through the day, it was the opposite. We started out kind and courteous, and we ended up, being belligerent. So this heart, Jupiter heart, had its fluctuations through the day, in that day number 3, which is why it's put there twice, just as an example. So you do this for yourself, and then you'd end up with a range, a descriptive range through your own self-examination and self-reflection, through your own observation of yourself through any given day. And again, it's being suggested through multiple days in a row. Well, then, if you are going to take the course, you can get to work. And we can get to work by looking at the chart, learning how to view the chart in the way that's been described, and therefore how to utilize that information. In this way, this course, and basically anything that I teach, has the intention to be quite practical, useful in our mundane life, in our everyday relationships, as well as in the maturing and evolution of our spiritual path. In this way, then, it has to be illuminating. It has to be revelatory, clarifying, purifying of our thoughts and ideas about ourselves. And one could ask, is there anything more practical than understanding oneself with the intention of self-betterment and clarity? I don't think there is. So join me in this class. It'll be quite practical. It'll factually help you on your spiritual path. It'll factually help you in your everyday life and your everyday relationships as well. So register. With that registration, you will receive a new birth chart. Of course, all the course materials are constantly sent to the students, handouts, videos of each session, the PDF of the visual presentation, such as the one you're viewing right now. You'll get a PDF of it. Some people like to take additional notes, on the actual slides. There also would be full commentary on any homework that is submitted, should you choose to submit the homework. The homework is always contemplative. So join me. Join me for this exploration of yourself. of your chart, there is tremendous spiritual wisdom within one's horoscope. We simply have to know how to access it, read it, and then apply it. And so join me for this 6-week online course. Love to have you. And until then, create your day.